What's up, guys? Welcome back to Worth the Wait. I am your host, Cookie Miller, and today I am so excited about our guest. His name is Dezi Abeyta. He is a registered dietitian, and we are talking about all the things in this episode. Let me tell you, this episode is so entertaining. It's so informative. Dezi drops so many jewels and gems that I cannot wait for you to get to hear about. We are already talking about doing a part two. So without further ado, let's get into this week's episode of Worth the Wait. What's up, guys? Welcome back to Worth the Wait. I am your host, Cookie Miller, and today I am so excited about the guests we have because there are so many things that we don't get to talk about when it comes to nutrition and really talking more so about people of color and nutrition. And you guys know that's what I'm all about when it comes to this podcast, is talking about our community. So thank you so much for being here, Des. I'm so excited about the conversation that we're going to have. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the field of nutrition to begin with?
Absolutely. Cookie, thank you so much for the invite. For all of our listeners out there, this has been quite the process. Shout out to Cookie and her team for knocking down my door and saying like, hey, like when is a good day? Because it's been busy on my end, but I'm super excited to be here, Cookie. To answer your question, I'm going to be real with you. I always have a tough time answering this because I have my hand in a lot of things that I've tried to mold around my life as like value systems. So if you're asking me, like, tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got in the field of nutrition. So my name is Dezi Abeyta. I'm turning 39 this year. I always try to tell people like I'm a proud husband, a proud father of two, a Latino dietitian entrepreneur. One of the things that I really love doing right now, and so it's kind of like different subsets of my business and some of my passion projects. But the first things first is I have a nutrition coaching program in a business that I really love pouring into. But one of my bigger pieces that I love is being the podcast host to the Can't Believe I Made It podcast, where we dive into the heroes' journeys and habits of athletes and entrepreneurs. And so that's one piece that I really love pouring into. Other things that I'm doing right now is I'm actually the nutrition advisor for Men's Health Magazine. So I'm a regular contributor and author for them, which I'm kind of thinking about it now. Back in college, when I had first started my nutrition career, I used to think of Men's Health Magazine as like the mecca of making it. And now that I'm doing
Yeah.
it, it's a really nice reminder to be like, wow, not only are you doing it, but the editors that I have are so open to me discussing the role of diversity and health literacy and cultural literacy in nutrition. And I think it's such a really beautiful place to be. And I'm glad that you and I really align on these messages because the story of how I got to nutrition is kind of a really weird one. I entered college thinking I was going to become a pediatrician. At the time, where I'm from, the University of Arizona in Tucson, Arizona, didn't have a pre-med program. And by default, they had a nutrition program. And so
Interesting.
I ended up getting into it. I always joke with people like I got my first set of C's in chemistry, and I was like, okay, I'm probably not going to get into med school with these C's. And it just so happened that like the transition was really nice because growing up as a Latino, like we center a lot of our culture and love around food and there's a huge stigma placed on eating rice, beans, tortillas, things like that. And I think as I started to understand nutrition a little bit more, I started to really fall in love with the aspects of like, how can I show up in this space, which is honestly predominantly white and really hasn't changed much since I started in college. I
Yeah.
think being a male of color in the space, I think I probably am part of the 1%, especially in the dietitian space. And so for me, as I continued to get into my career, it just really was validating that I made the right choice. I definitely could have hunkered down and retook those chemistry classes and tried to get those up, but like fell in love with it. Like, why would I go back to something that was like super stressful that like I thought I enjoyed, but the nutrition path has been super dope. It's had its horrible moments. It's something that I continue to try to show up for because of these stigmas around some of our diverse populations, but it's become passion work on my end. Like if I can talk my shit, then I'm happy.
Yeah, yeah. It's so interesting that that's how you got into things because,
Yeah.
I mean, for us, I think just in this space and in this field, what we come across a lot when we're thinking about doctors is how little education they have when it
Yep.
comes to nutrition. So for your first path to have been, okay, I'm going to be a pediatrician. And now you get, swooped into the whole nutrition
Yeah.
field. It's almost like, how does that even happen? It had to be like destined.
It really has because I was looking through some of like the questions that you had sent over, like, hey, like here's kind of like the broad outline of what we might talk about. And I was going through my story and I was like, damn. So I started in eating disorders. I did that for about 10 years. I moved from there into community nutrition, which in that realm and then on the nutrition side is exactly where I started to understand cultural literacy because the crazy thing about being in eating disorders is it taught me how to communicate really complex issues and feelings and moving through stages of healing as it pertains to food and trauma, which for most people who struggle with their relationship with food, there's going to be some pieces of trauma in that. And that's just like
Yeah.
something that I learned. And predominantly, that demographic rather was rich white females, mostly. And so I kind of took that. And I remember when I got into community nutrition, 98% of my clients were all Spanish speaking, like only Spanish speaking. So I remember talking to them and, I might come in for like a diabetes education or a high blood pressure education as a dietitian. And I remember talking with them. I was like, have you tried quinoa before? And I'm talking about these different grains that is just
Yeah.
going over their head. And the more that I understood a little bit more, I was like, damn, food access is the issue here. Like food access and education is the issue. So I kind of took a step back and was like, you know what? Instead of printing out these really beautiful pamphlets of like, no, like let me go ahead and create a food pantry here because these people need access to food before we can even
Yeah.
start tackling some of these other things. So I did that. And then from there, I went into professional baseball as a sports dietitian, which like is a whole nother level of
Yeah.
nutrition education because there's a separation of privilege. And then a lot of our Latinos that come from the Latin American countries are coming in and don't understand a lot of the things that are happening in the US as it pertains to
Right.
food access and types of food and things like that. And then from there into entrepreneurship. So it's all just really been Cookie this like cool path that I honestly couldn't even have like predicted. But uh, I mean, no complaints on my end. Like I'm enjoying myself up to this point.
Yeah, I mean, you have so many different areas to pull from when it comes to this. Because I
Yeah.
was listening back at your TED Talk, which now I
Thank
realize
you, by the
is,
way.
of course, it was 6 years ago, though. So that baby girl you were talking about,
She's
I
8 now.
mean, that's crazy. That's
Yeah.
crazy. But I mean, like to hear all the different perspectives that you have, it's like you not only have the perspective of maybe like a person of color who's coming from this background where there was a lack of food access, but now, like you said, you have this privileged kind of
Yeah.
background where you're working with an athlete who's getting this for, we're talking about nutrition for a whole different reason. We're talking about fueling workouts and
Yeah.
all of that versus maybe talking about weight loss. So you
Hmm.
have a lot of different, perspectives to pull from. What would you say is the thing culturally that you've kind of taken with you, regardless of what the level is, what the who the student is?
Yeah. Um, I love that question. To be honest, probably the biggest takeaway for me is that as a dietitian, as someone who is in that role of supporting someone's health and wellness performance, whatever that is, just like you had said, whichever level, I think our past conditioning plays a really big role. And I think for me, the biggest takeaway has been how can I validate your past conditioning in a way that helps you to be curious if you're going down a path that is not conducive to your goal. So here's an example. When I was working in Major League Baseball, the organization was trying to figure out why our Latin American players would not eat the food from the cafeteria. Which to me and you're like, what?
Right.
Duh, right? So they sent me down to the Dominican Republic to figure out why. And in my brain, I'm like, I already know the reason, but if you're gonna send me to DR, like I'll go.
Yeah.
So as we went there, I got an experience of what was going on in their culture. I talked with their parents. I educated them about here are some things that you can start doing right now that'll help them with their eating behavior and the performance as they get to the U.S. But I came back and I tried to explain this, and I think, to be honest, Cookie, it went over a lot of the like high level people's head because they don't get it. There's
Yeah.
a level of privilege in that they just don't understand. But to me, I was trying to explain to them that a lot of these athletes are 17, 18, some younger. Their family is their whole life. And if they are
Yeah.
plucked out of their environment into a brand new environment, their only connection to their family and their culture oftentimes is food. So the way that you prepare the food, the way that you present it, if you can do it in a way, I mean, each and every one of us, if you have a privilege enough to still have your parents around, anytime that you go back to your parents' house, your parents will make you something and it
Yeah.
helps you to feel good. There's that like feeling of love and belonging. It's the same thing here. So if you're asking like what's the biggest takeaway, regardless of whether the person is an elite level athlete, the person is engaging in a wellness journey where they're trying to maximize their body recomposition or trying to feel better or more confident about their self. For me, I always try to validate the past experiences and try to help them to be curious about with the path that you're on, are you doing things that uphold the values that you hold, or are we doing things that maybe don't have that same picture? Like, how can we start having conversations around? And I think bringing in curiosity is probably one of the best tools when it comes to that.
Yeah. So, like, if you're thinking about someone, whether it's an athlete or if it's someone who is on a weight loss journey, which is usually who I'm dealing with in terms
Yeah.
of clientele, how do you make that transition? Are you the type of uh coach where you're wanting to like keep some of the traditional foods in? Are you reworking the traditional foods? Like, what does that look like? Do we go from the beans and rice to now we're just eating quinoa or
Yeah.
you
No,
see my
no.
face? I'm like, please.
Yeah.
I'm from New Orleans, so it's
Yeah.
like,
No, I would not. New Orleans is fantastic food, by the way. Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that I try to do is like, let's just look at the average person who might be coming to me that comes from a diverse and cultural background that maybe comes to me with some concerns around their lipid health, right? Or their lipid
Mhm.
panel or things like that. So what I try to do is try to uphold and educate them about the value of their cultural foods. And at the same time, let's say I was literally just talking with a client today about their LDL levels. So I was educating that person about more often than not, when we're looking at it from a dietary perspective, we're looking at the role of saturated fat as it pertains to what it does to your LDL or what it does to your overall cholesterol. So I'm not telling you to stop eating red meat or things like that, but what I am telling you is how can we be a bit more plant forward? Increase the fiber, right? Increase the
Right.
variety of the nutrients that we're getting. So for me, I will never tell someone to do away with the cultural foods, but what I like to do is I like to pull in additions. I like to pull in some different variations, right? Like some of my
Love that.
favorite like variations, even on the like the term of quinoa, is I've had clients do like more of a like a pulled pork taco and doing more of like a quinoa spread inside the taco. So like for most of them, they're like,
Yeah.
"What is this?" And then after they have it, they're like, that actually was pretty good. So it's just about like trying new things. And I think if
Yep.
we get people curious about flavor and nutrition and how can we add things in versus what mostly our diet culture has sort of positioned our mind is, well, we have to let go of all the things that we love in order to get to the type of ideal body that we want to get. And I'm always one that's looking at the nuance of it. You know, that might work for some people, but it doesn't work for most. So I
Yeah.
like to pull in additions. I'm not one that is, do away with your cultural foods. I'm not trying to get you to hate me so you don't like work with me past a month. You know what I mean?
Right? Because if you're like, take out the red beans and rice, I'm like,
No, how dare
never.
you?
Never. But I
Yeah,
love that. I love that you're thinking about, okay, what can be added? Because just like you said, when we're thinking about diet culture and, the way that I've gone through diet culture, having, lost 100 pounds and all of that, it was
yeah,
always take away this. it was always like, even if you're thinking about January coming up, everyone's like, all right, no sugar, no this, no that. There's like a no list. And I'm like,
Yeah.
we need to start making a yes list.
Yeah, exactly. A
Like
yes
what
list.
can we add in? How can we add in the veggies to this? I was even telling my client earlier, this might sound a little crazy, okay? But I was doing check-ins today and I have a client and she had gone out to eat and I told her, I was starting to kind of see a pattern where when she goes out to eat, like her thing is to like she's going to get the thing that she never gets to have.
Yeah.
So she gets that, but then she only gets that. And I'm like, look, I'm not even mad at you for getting the thing, like the fries or whatever it was that you wanted. I'm like,
Yeah.
but just be a little crazy and get like a side of veggies with it.
Yeah. Add,
If
add.
odd, it might look a little crazy, you're at the table with, fries and broccoli, but at least you got some fiber in there.
All right. So, Cookie, two things. One, I have a request of you. Can we
Okay.
collaborate on a yes list in 2025?
Dude, I
Can we
love
do
that.
that?
I'm so down. I'm so down.
We could build that out. We could do
Yeah.
some like video things back and I think I love our vibe already. I hope you do
Me
too.
too. Me too. Me too. You
All
guys
right,
are hearing this live.
let's
And if
connect that.
yeah, we got to do it. If you guys want the yes list, definitely let us know. Leave a comment,
Yeah,
tag us, something.
I love that. And I think the other thing too, Cookie, is like I always tell people like, look, the basics, the foundations, they're not sexy. They're just not. I understand that. But if you truly want to develop this into a lifestyle where you don't have to put a lot of mental energy into navigating getting enough fiber, navigating going out for those walks, or navigating really solid recovery based sleep, the basics aren't sexy. I always tell clients, I know you're not going to want to hear this from me, but if we can increase your regularity around your sleep, helping you to go to bed at the same time and waking up at the same time, we're actually going to maximize your effort, whether it's weight loss, fat loss, performance, mental performance, anything like that. And if you can follow the balanced plate model where a quarter of your plate has protein, the other quarter has quality carbohydrates, half of
Yeah.
that plate has some beautiful color on that plate from fruits and veggies with a little bit of fat sprinkled on top, big things are going to happen. If I tell you that, that sounds so basic and you're like, but that's not what I've
Yeah.
heard. That's not what is sexy. Believe me, I've been at this game for a long time. I've not gotten over 5,000 followers because what I talk about is not necessarily sexy. It's the foundation.
Yeah, yeah. And those are the basics that are going to keep you through this whole thing. I know so many people who listen to this podcast are people who want to lose weight. And the
Yeah.
question is always like, how did you do it? What did you do? And everybody wants like the some kind of like fancy answer. There was this magic supplement. There was this, this diet was the
This
best
magic
diet that
food.
I ever, right? And it's like, dude, no, like I started going to sleep. I started carrying a freaking gallon water bottle around until I could get into the habit of drinking, a gallon of water. It's just,
Yeah.
it's the basic stuff. It's the boring stuff.
It's not sexy, but it works. I hate to break it to most people, but it's really true. Like sleep, nutrition, getting your steps in, working out, being okay with the rest day. It's not sexy, but it works.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, Desi. Like, we're thinking about people who are at that point where they're like, I know I need to do something. I want to make a change. I know that I can't go on like this. People are getting older. What is it that would be like that first step where it's like someone's coming from they've done all the fad diets. They may have been the person who tried the crazy weight loss tea or something like that, and now they just want to do something that's sustainable. What's the first step?
I like to use I when I work with a client who is brand new to this or maybe is trying to overcome some really bad past conditioning, whether it's yo-yo dieting or just thoughts about food or relationship with food, I like to look at it in four different pillars. So we'll address how they eat, we'll address how they move, we'll address how they sleep, and then also how they think, which I think plays a
Mm,
really big role into everything that we do. And so when I have someone inside of my program, something I talk about on my podcast a lot is these four pillars. From those four pillars, we keep it really, really simple. I call them the small, simple steps. And
okay.
so if someone is trying to maximize their effort around nutrition, what I'll do in the first week is I'll say, hey, I want you to build this balance plate, or I like to refer to it as like this athlete's plate. Or if someone is not an athlete that's coming in, I put the name on it, like this is the Desi plate, if you will. And
Right.
so I'll ask them, hey, here's what a balanced plate looks like. If we're looking at it from breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which meal do you feel like you can definitely do this at least once a day? More often than not, it's breakfast because kind of what starts the day. And so, what I'll do with someone is the first week, I'm going to be really simple. This is your one goal. We're going to get feedback of how to alter some things. So, after a week, I'll ask them, hey, are you ready to move this into breakfast and then also lunch? And then into that second week, we do the same thing. In under 30 days, they've completely revamped their nutrition by just bringing in consistency. Now, there's a caveat here. If someone's not able to do that, and this is okay, and this is what happens with most people, especially in the new year, they jot down all of these goals and then they get on themselves 7 days into the new year that they've fallen off, and it's like, I'm a piece of crap. I can't do this one thing. I always tell people to take a step back and say, if you're not able to complete a goal, it's because it's too complicated. We need to simplify it more. So instead of that balanced plate with that person that's struggling to get it each and every day, I'll take a step back and I'll say, you know what? Cool. This is information for us. Let's be curious about it. Is it that you're not planning? Is it that even just the whole concept of ordering foods and getting foods available to build that balanced plate is just too hard right now? Okay, cool. Let's start with the portion of the plate. Can you add 2 colors of veggies or 2 colors of fruit with those meals in the morning? Cool. And then we start there. So it's about trying to dial in some information around the behavior. And then if they're not able to accomplish it, we take that step back and we simplify it even more. But I think that's usually the biggest thing that I start with is someone who is trying to revamp their whole position around their relationship with wellness is we look at those 4 pillars and look at the biggest opportunity, because if I can give you some small wins in the beginning, really big things happen in the end because you're not giving up on yourself because we made it too complicated by giving you 7 things to work on in the first 30 days.
This is so good.
I was,
The crazy thing is, like, I always have to stop myself. I'm like, don't interrupt,
yeah.
right? It's like the ADHD is just wanting to say
No,
something, but
hey,
I'm
I'm the same
like,
way. Interrupt. I'm giving you full go to interrupt.
this is so good because it's what I hear you say is that this is individualized.
It is. It has to be.
So the first step for one person is not going to be the same first step for someone else.
It can't be because like again, not only are we just different humans, but each and every one of us come from past experiences, and so a lot of us come with like different baggage, right?
Right. Yeah. I
And
mean,
that's
we all have
okay.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it makes me kind of just think back to my journey and a story that I always tell because so many people will ask, especially my clients, they'll say, "Well, when did you feel like you just like had it?" Like, when was it just like you knew that you had it? And I think people are very surprised by the answer because I'll often say, I think it was about the 3-year mark. And people go, wait, what?
3 years.
3 years? And I'm like, yeah. I mean, I spent that first year, really focused, heavily losing the weight, year and a half, getting to 100 pounds. And then there was a point that I got to after I lost the weight, got to my goal, and I went, I think I have to keep doing all this stuff.
Yeah,
And
like
I'm like, wait, so there's not like it's not, we're not just done. It wasn't just I got to the goal and now I'm there. Now I can just go back to regular life. It's like, no, these are things I have to keep doing now. So I always say the 3-year mark because I feel like that's when I had that aha moment of, I have to keep doing this. So in your experience, when you're seeing people kind of having that aha moment, what do you think it is in terms of mindset that people need to shift or identify to go from I'm on a diet to like, this is my lifestyle now?
I think it's the small things that as coaches, it's really our responsibility to try to help them to understand and observe. As you're talking, some of the things that I love pointing out are like, let's just look at, each and every one of us that see a doctor usually get our labs done. So if it's the improvement in labs, if it's getting off of a medication, if it's, damn, like I started doing this thing and like my kids are starting to ask questions and they're starting to eat some of the same foods. Or my kid asked me to go play basketball the other day or work out with me the other day. Or my loved one is starting on the same journey that I am. So I think what it has to do to a larger degree is what is happening inside of their environment. If they start to understand and start to see that these little 1% changes are happening for them, it really helps them and drives them to be a bit more value based around doing this next thing for themselves and their health versus just being goal oriented around, well, I need to get to this weight or to this metric. And it helps them to be more purposeful about what they're doing. And I don't know, Cookie, if that's the same for you. Like, I would imagine 100 pounds down, you've been able to sustain it for quite some time. Like, you've probably had to completely change your environment.
Oh, yeah, quite a few times too.
Yeah.
Which is what I tell people as well. As you go through life, things change. Like even thinking back to like your TED talk, right? What things looked like 7 years ago when you're trying to teach baby girl, how to
Jeez.
eat versus where
Yeah.
things are now. So I think another thing is that people can't be married to whatever the process is when they first start.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
it's going to shift, it's going to change. So, like, be prepared for that versus where I think a lot of people get stuck is like when that first change happens and they go, oh crap, I can't make this fit that. And it's like, well, no one's expecting you to make this fit that. Like, that's not even realistic. You have to now pivot, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So,
It's all about progression. I think if you understand how to sometimes be okay with maintenance and sustain and develop habits and skills that really help you to feel like you're moving in the right direction. I think one of my favorite things to tell clients is that sometimes maintenance is progress. I know it's really uncomfortable,
oh,
especially if you're brand new in your journey and you, let's say you're someone who has a lot of weight or a lot of fat to lose, merely just getting started, you're probably going to see some results pretty quickly because the body is just not used to that type of work. But as you start to advance a little bit more, the body's really dope in this way, is it starts to normalize where it's at and it starts to become harder to do certain things. But that's where consistency in science kind of comes in and says, okay, well, maybe if the target date was this, we kind of need to do away with the target date and do a little bit more with the target habits. And so I
oh.
think there, like, that's where real progress happens. And those are those maintenance phases that a lot of people are really, really uncomfortable with.
Yeah, yeah, it's tough, but sometimes you got to like throw the scale away.
That's like literally, Cookie, that's like one of my first things that I do with anytime that a client, I get any sort of whiff of, well, I weigh myself every day or I stepped on the scale and it ruined my day, something like that. I'm like, do you trust me? Like, and usually by that point, it's like, yeah, like, what do you need? Like, I need you to take that scale and just throw it in the trash.
Yep.
In order for us to continue, I need you to fully trust me and yourself. And that whatever reading that is giving us, there's a lot of fluctuation. Like it can't be trusted. It's just normally what happens with the body. So throw that thing away. It's only going to distract us from what the overall goal is. So I think that's probably an area that I look at.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy to see how much, power the scale can really have from a mindset standpoint. Like you said, waking up and weighing in, and now your whole day is ruined. I mean, that's so much power for the scale to have.
So much power.
And I think about that a lot too when I think about yo-yo dieting and how that even happens, how that cycle happens. And a lot of times I think it's tied to what we're seeing on the scale because the scale doesn't react in a certain way. And then you're like, throw the whole diet away, throw everything that I'm doing
Yep.
away. So is there like a particular relationship you tend to see that women, because I mean, that's who listens to this
Yeah. Yeah.
podcast, but is there a particular food relationship you see from women who have a history of yo-yo dieting? And then what's your approach in handling that?
There's a lot of, I mean, I think first things first, like we need to address, especially most of us are finding our nutrition information from social media. So there's the first thing that I would like to say here, just take a step back and discuss the differences between misinformation and disinformation. So
Mhm.
misinformation are the people that are providing the information that is not evidence-based or wrong. They just don't know it's wrong. Like they're sort of stemming off of something that they heard from maybe a creator that they respect, whatever, right? So there's that piece. So there's the misinformation piece, and then there's the disinformation crowd that is trying to dissuade you in a really horrible way based off of some sort of narrative that they have. And so what I like to do with people is, and you usually kind of get this, and I'm sure you probably experience some of the same things when you onboard a new client. In the first couple calls, you're starting to understand how they think about food.
Right.
And so as I get their check-ins or explore their behavior, or we have these conversations and coaching sessions, one thing that I try to pull out is some of those belief systems and limiting beliefs around what they're able to do, around their habits, and around what they do in general, how they spend their time and who they spend their time with. That's kind of how I phrase it. And from there, as I build trust, what I try to do is I try to help them to understand how the misinformation is playing a role in their overall ability to get said goal done. And when you're trying something new with food, like you're going to be really, you're not going to be trusting of the process at first. And I think that's okay.
Mm.
But for me, what I like to do is be really good about pointing them in a direction of here are the places that you're getting better. Here's what we need to improve on from an opportunity standpoint. And then showing them what that progress looks like over time. And so I think if I can show you progression over time, some really cool things happen. You start to trust the process. But it is a process and it doesn't happen right away.
Yeah, yeah, especially if the history is really long, which a
Yeah.
lot of times for women it is because you were talking about this in some, see, I've been stalking so much of your
Yeah, I
stuff.
love
I don't know where you
it.
said it, but you were talking about people trying to keep up with this image.
Yeah.
And that a lot of like disordered eating was coming from like people trying to keep up with an image that, maybe their body genetically can't even, it's not even possible.
Yeah.
Not to mention we've got women who are comparing themselves to women who have had cosmetic procedures. I mean, there's so much to consider, especially in this day and age.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me started on the BMI and how limited
Oh
it is.
gosh, can we
Like
talk about the BMI just a
don't get me
little?
yeah.
Come
This is
on,
what kills me
give me
about
your soapbox speech.
yeah, this is what kills me about the BMI. So the researcher that created it took white men as like the metric. After all the findings that they did, mind you, he's a mathematician, right? Not a clinician.
Right.
What came back is that this can't be the determining factor around health status. It can be a point that helps us to understand if someone has some co-occurring things that are happening in their life that we need to tackle. That's the first thing. The second thing that we look at, because he took white males completely, in my eyes at least, invalidates the metric being used for people of color.
100%.
I don't know if you noticed this, we look different. So when
Hello.
people used to come to me, and this is like more of a medical thing, I remember very early on, I was trying to educate the doctors that I was working with, and I was like, hey, we got mostly a Latino culture that are most of our clientele, and I think we're kind of doing them a disservice by merely just looking at their BMI and not really understanding their activity level, their diet, exercise, all those things.
Right.
We're not having those conversations. And mind you, that's why you're triggering them to me so that I can have those. And I just want to thank you all. But I'm wondering if we can start using some different verbiage around their body size. Instead of calling someone obese, let's ask questions. If their blood sugars are high, their blood pressure is high, like those are perfect things outside of you telling them that you should probably lose weight because your BMI is
Right.
high. It does more detriment than anything else in my experience. So I think because the BMI is so limited, I will observe it. It's a point, it's a data point that I will use, but I'm not making any sort of like rash decisions based off of just the BMI by itself. And I think that in itself, we need to actually start pulling in an opportunity here to talk about it a bit differently versus you need to lose some weight. Your BMI is high. Okay, what does that mean? If we look at the metric, Cookie, like I'm right on the cusp of 29 and 30. Like I'm considered obese.
Yep.
And so like
Yep.
it doesn't look at bone density, doesn't look at muscle mass, doesn't look at a lot of things that it's just a limiting factor that I don't think should have as much power as it does.
I absolutely agree. And I think that it's hurting people actually to look at the BMI. It's
Yeah.
hurting people to look at the BMI because I think what people start to connect is they say, if I lose weight, then I will be healthy. And that is not true.
Yeah.
But that would put us on a whole other tangent. I think
It
it would put us on a whole other
Listen,
tangent to
we don't
talk
have to
about
go
that.
there. We don't have to go there. Oh my God, I still got to read this book. I don't know if it's come across your desk, but a lot of the really phenomenal, culturally literate dietitians of color that are friends of mine are such beautiful beacons of like helping me to understand my privilege as a male, helping me to understand that, like how we need to truly serve, especially our black and brown communities. It's called Fearing the Black Body. Have you come across it?
I have not, but I'm going to write that down.
Please. I'm it's still in my freaking Amazon inbox that I need to purchase, or my Amazon cart rather. But even just reading certain excerpts from it and things like that, I think we have this ideal body, and in most cases, the ideal thin body is the thin white body. And I think anything outside of that is has been exposed in a way that is unhealthy, right?
Yeah.
If we look at the traditional black or brown body, like we kind of know what that looks like in our heads, and we have some really endearing thoughts about it. But even just the process of that, I think a lot of us need to just continue to have conversations about, especially as we serve clients in those communities. Yeah, we probably should do a part two after we read so that we can just have a discussion because I think it's something that we should just continue to talk about because the ideal body is your own. Like you make it.
100%, 100%. And what I really want those who are listening to know and to understand is that when you're seeing these positive health outcomes that may come with weight loss, you have to also consider that the habit changes, the dietary changes that have happened that are contributing to the systems within your body just working well in general. It's not always a cause and effect in that way. I think there's just so much focus on like, if I lose weight, then all of this will change. But it's like you could have made some dietary changes, lost a little bit less weight, and
Yeah.
maybe even been healthier. But that's like part three.
Yeah. That's not even to like bring in the mental component of what it is to like truly starve yourself and get to that point and to move the goalpost once you get there. It's a really hard process that people get caught up in. And I think a lot of people, and this is completely anecdotal, by the way, this is my take, my observation. So I met my wife in eating disorder treatment. So she is a trauma therapist, an eating disorder therapist. So she was a therapist, I was a dietitian, and we oftentimes joke that you can't share a level of vulnerability with people and like not find a connection. So my wife and I always joke like we fell in love during sessions, doing sessions together for clients. And so one of the things that her and I oftentimes talk about is the ED goggles, like the eating disorder goggles. Like you can never take them off. I can go to a gym, I can go to places, and I can look at certain behaviors or things like that and be like,
Yeah,
that person's walking around and probably needs some help.
yeah,
These are just things that you can't take off. And I think a lot of people are walking around with like pseudo disordered eating, eating disorder relationships that they're just not aware of because to them it's, well, I'm getting healthier. I'm limiting my
yeah,
body size. And for me, I always try to come back with, well, how do you feel about that? Do you feel like you're in a good space mentally, not only just how you're interacting with your habits, but also how you're interacting with your body and your relationships? That's something that we never talk about
yeah.
is the relationship piece. So I think there's a lot that goes into it, and we just need to continue to have conversations about it.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioning just relationships kind of made me think about community and made me think about where community really starts for a lot of people, which is just within your home. Like your first community is like your family members, your kids, your spouse. And what I see, I'm not a mom. I am a TT though. And I'm the
Hey, let's
TT who
go.
makes my nephews and my little niece like all the healthy options. I'm that crazy
Uh,
TT.
I love it.
But I think about like a lot of my moms who are working with me, and their thing is always like, I've made my meal and now I have to also make a meal for the rest of the household.
I hate it.
I-
I I
I'm
hate
glad
it.
you hate it too. Go off, Desi.
Go off. All right, full go. One of my things when I'm working with the family is I will get everyone together on a call and get everyone involved to set expectations.
Ooh.
What has been really, really advantageous for me is that when we first have this like discovery nutrition programming call where it's like, hey, Des, I like your vibe. I want to understand what it looks like to work together. What does that look like? I'm like, cool. Let me go ahead. I'm going to send over a couple questions to understand what you're looking for to see if I can help. If I feel like this is a good fit, dope. If you have family members, let's bring them to the call. Because for me, what I like to do is help the family members to understand how important and imperative this process is for, let's say in this case, for the mom or the wife
Right.
or the significant other. If I can bring emotion into the mix and help people to understand that this isn't just about feeling more confident in your body, like this is in some cases like this is impacting your love and your sex life with your partner. This is
Yeah.
impacting your inability to do what you need to do in your job to move up. This is
Yeah.
impacting your ability to show up and set boundaries for yourself and your family. So if I can do that, I get everyone on board. And so one of the things that I hate is that if family members are eating different foods at the table, you can have different variations. Listen, I'm a father of two now. I get it. 6 years removed from a TED talk about how I couldn't feed my daughter a bottle and what I learned from it. I'm still learning 6 years later. Like I've done all the things that I said that people needed to do, and sometimes it's not working, and I'm like, all right, longevity. I just need to be consistent here. So for me, if I can help the family to understand that this is why we all need to be on the same page, and this is what setting boundaries looks like, really good things happen. Now, Cookie, mind you, there have definitely been some experiences where the family environment really isn't conducive or supportive, and we just got to work with what we have. And it's unfortunate, but we just got to work with what we have, and we have to be okay that maybe the timeline might be a little bit skewed because of your environment. And I'm not here to tell you to like leave your family or leave that person, but I'm also here to tell you, as you start to level up, if that person doesn't come with you, like, are they your person? Sometimes they're not.
Oh, I didn't know we were connected in that way. It's
Like,
rare.
let's just like call it what it is. Like, if you set into a journey of leveling up and the person you're sharing your life with does not also follow suit, you're probably going to find that some of the things that you used to connect with are no longer in your value system. And probably some of the things you used to connect with are probably the things that got you sick in a place where you needed someone like myself or like Cookie here to like help you. So
Yeah.
I've definitely had some breakups in my coaching career, if you will, because of that reason.
It's a real thing. I mean, it's like when I want to not forget this though, because I did want to ask you a follow-up question first, and I'd rather forget the second part, which is how, if someone is in that situation where the family environment is not supportive, I get that you're saying we have to work with it,
Yeah.
but literally how? Like, how does that work if someone else is, like I've had so many different instances with clients, I'm sure you have too, where they have a family member who's always bringing back, some kind of fast food, or, maybe they're not the ones who actually buys all the groceries. Like, how do you navigate that?
I mean, it kind of goes back to what I said earlier. You pull them in, you get them interested in why this benefits them as well. I think the people that we work with, we get the fantastic opportunity to help them to be healthy role models in their environments. If you get your environment on the same page and you get them excited about those things, like I like to go the extra mile, Cookie. Like I do. Like if I have someone who's coming in, like I have a client, I'm literally doing this right now where I have a client who has come to me and really needs some help with their performance and their body recomposition. And what's come up is what's happening at home. So we kind of split the weeks where it's like I'm working on this person and then I'm working on the other family member in the second week of how to
Mm,
develop meals at home for the kids and things like that. And even today, what has come up where it's like, hey, like I kind of some things, some conversations have been had in the household, and I kind of want to split our time with not so much of like preparation, but like coaching with the other person. And I think that piece is really cool because that means conversations are being had. Mind you, that doesn't always happen. And we got to be able to work with what we can here. And if the said family member keeps coming home with fast food and is not really supportive, more than likely, Cookie, they're not going to jump on with me. I will request, but
yeah.
they don't. And it's like, listen, this is what we're working with. We can decide to stop what we're doing right now because this is really triggering for you, or like this is not conducive to what you want. But based off of our conversations, this seems like this is really important. Does this one little barrier tip us in the direction of quitting, or does this one little barrier tip us in the direction of getting tactical? And I think those pieces are really, really big pieces that people need to understand.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I think the kind of like the consensus of what I hear you saying in general is how important accountability is.
Yeah,
And a lot of people, when we talk about accountability, I think people can think, oh gosh, they just want you to like go and sign up and be a part of their program. And like, I mean, sure, like if you're a great fit, I'd love to have you. But in all seriousness, accountability is such an important part to all of this when you're fighting against, like you said earlier, belief systems that you've developed over, decades. Like you're going to need help to navigate this new space.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's all conducive. It really has a lot to do with your environment. I always like to, when I'm working with someone, like to bring up the concept of the noun, like the person, place, or thing. Like these are the things that are going to trigger you and also uplift you. If they trigger you, how can we set your environment in a way where it starts to uplift you? And if we can't get to that point, we get to have uncomfortable conversations with whether that person, place, or thing needs to be a part of your life. And that's not an easy convo or an easy decision. But based off of what you're telling me, we need to make some hard decisions here.
I thought I was the only coach who was telling people to break up with their friends, but it's funny. Listen, I'll say one more thing. I have a YouTube video that I put out years ago. I think it's almost been 10 years now. It is still like it will weekly be the top performing YouTube video
That's
now.
great.
And that video is called Lose Weight, Lose Friends.
It's true.
It's so true.
It's true.
It's so true. But I think if we can take a note from Desi and think about the adding
Hmm.
perspective, because what really happened, like for me and what I see happening for clients is you shift and you start to invite new people, into your space. You meet somebody while you're out at a walking group, and now you all have this new thing to connect on that's not, necessarily food or binging on food or everything has to be celebrated with food. Now you have a different way to celebrate and you're welcoming a new way of thinking and being and communing into your life.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's a really beautiful thing.
it is. We got to do this again.
Yeah. I mean, we just
Please
set
tell me
forth some
you'll come back.
collaboration ops. Yeah. 100%. We got to do this again when we discuss like the yes list for 25. So like, let's just do it again.
Yeah, we should do one just ahead of New Year, ahead of
I
the
would
new
love
year.
that. I would love
Yeah, for
that because
sure.
I'm taking a little break from my pod, so a little mental health break, a little regeneration break for
Okay.
Q4. So maybe we'll do a crosscast or something. I don't know. That'd be dope.
Yeah, yeah, we got to do something like that. Well, I super appreciate you for coming on. You have just been a wealth of knowledge, and this has been, don't tell anybody, this has been one of my favorite episodes because I'm like, we are vibing. I'm so glad that we connected. If you guys missed
Same.
it in the beginning, Des and I connected on Threads actually,
Shout out.
so randomly. And I'm so glad that we did because I feel like we've got some of the same, like, thought processes. And I think that our audience would definitely want to hear from you again. So
Yeah.
tell everyone where they can find you, what you have coming up, so that they can stalk you like I have been.
Yeah, no, please, please. Most of where I'm showing up these days is on IG. You can find me at dietitian Des. Go in my link in bio. I have all of our podcast episodes that are loaded there. So like I said, I'm the host of the Can't Believe I Made It podcast. We are currently in a little break because, like I said, I need a little bit of me time. But those are the two places that I show up consistently, and from there you'll be able to find where we show up on YouTube, TikTok, things like that. But I think those are the two things that I'm pouring a lot of energy into. And then also you can search my name on Men's Health. I'm a regular contributor. If you're someone who really loves the mag, give a shout out to me if you come across one of my pieces. I always love the love. So Cookie, thank you so much for the invite.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you guys so much for watching this week's episode of Worth the Wait. Remember, if this episode or any of our episodes have helped you, please consider leaving us a 5-star review. You can also take a little screenshot of the episode and tag us at Worth the Wait Podcast or at Cookie Miller. And I will talk to you guys next time.